Hello. My name again is Lucas Hilderbrand. It's my pleasure to moderate the Q&A following Mala Noche. I want to just begin by thanking KJ and May for programming this amazing series and for the invitation for us to be here tonight. I'm sure that Gus needs no introduction because you're all here, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. So if you'll bear with me for just a moment, and then we'll bring Gus to the stage. So you've just seen the debut feature by writer-director Gus Van Sant, Mala Noche. From here, he went on to make numerous essential films that have defined recent American cinema, including Drugstore Cowboy, My Own Private Idaho, To Die For, Good Will Hunting, Jerry, Elephant, Milk, Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, among numerous others. His films Good Will Hunting and Milk were both nominated for Best Director and Best Picture at the Academy Awards. He was also the first to debut fashion-forward menswear on the red carpet at the Oscars the year of Good Will Hunting, which made an impression on gay little me. His film Elephant won the Palme d'Or and Best Director at the Cannes Film Festival. He has also won numerous other awards, from the Berlinale, the Independent Spirit Awards, National Society of Film Critics, New York Film Critics Circle, and the Razzie Awards. And as a queer, we consider this last award as much an honor as any other. He has also earned an Outfest Lifetime Achievement Award. He has worked across scales and styles, at once embodying American independent cinema at the moment of its cultural breakthrough, and then becoming even more radical in his style with a swerve with Jerry, Elephant, and Last Days as indie cinema became increasingly conventional. Although his aesthetic adapts from feature to feature, a sensibility carries through. I also credit him with revealing to the world that Nicole Kidman is actually a great actress with To Die For. So thank you, Gus, for that. I love Nicole. His films are queer not simply because they sometimes include gay or gay-ish characters, but because they are films that so often look to outlaws, rebels, hustlers, and social outsiders. His films are also often rooted in the placeness of Portland and the Pacific Northwest, as well as the attention to class and street life within these urban areas, as well as the open road. In my own life, my interest in cinema is coterminous with his career, and Drugstore Cowboy in particular was a formative film for me that I watched dozens of times on the VHS that I bought used from the video store in my hometown. It was an epiphany for me at the time, and it still holds up remarkably well. I just watched it again yesterday. I still fucking love that movie. Uh, and I only much later saw Mala Noche. My Own Private Idaho was iconically what queerness looked like to me at the time. Jerry stunned me with its audacity of form and its swerve in terms of style. And a friend and I road tripped to San Francisco to see Milk in the Castro Theater to feel its history, and we were rewarded with an amazing film. So I would like to bring to the stage Gus Van Sant, who I'm deeply honored to be in conversation with this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really amazing.
So I'd like to begin the conversation situating this film, but also your sort of relationship to the category of queer cinema, given the framing of this series. So this film you said was you started shooting in '83, you finished in '85, which actually makes it contemporaneous with films like Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise and Down by Law, and sort of part of that independent American cinema movement. And it was actually several years before New Queer Cinema would be named in a particular way. So I was wondering, just to begin, what does the term queer cinema even mean to you? And do you actually think your films are queer cinema?
I want them to be, because those guys are great. But I think it was, as a label, especially new queer cinema. I mean, queer cinema, or even the word queer, was coming along, like in the mid '80s. So I think I just was this particular film predated it. I mean, I went to Sundance with a rough cut of My Own Private Idaho um, with me, and I showed it in a hotel room. And it was the year that I was one of the judges, and we gave Todd Haynes the award. And I think it was the next year, '92, when there was the kind of grouping of some of the uh, queer cinema makers, the great ones like Tom Kalin and Greg Araki, Todd Haynes, Derek Jarman was there, and and queer cinema or gay cinema was taking over, or really like, welcomed at Sundance, and they were kind of becoming larger and larger. So that was kind of to me, the new queer cinema was those guys, and they were newer than I was. They were younger than I was, and I missed that year that they all went together to there was a conference and a little talk about what they were doing. Yeah.
So did you ever feel like you were part of a movement within these films, or you just felt like you were
I
always
think
actually
when
sort
they
of
were
somewhere
they were
else?
really sort of standing and like having their moment, I thought, yes, this is like it's a movement. But I think there were people around. Bill Sherwood had made Parting Glances. I did enter this film in at Sundance, and it was refused because the reasoning was in 1985, the Parting Glances and Desert Hearts were both playing. So they were kind of getting gay friendly. Maybe it would have been included in '91 or something like that, but they would have made room for it. But didn't make it in. But yeah,
Well, I think this. I mean, obviously, this is a very different film from Party Glances or Desert Hearts,
yeah,
and it's not
for sure.
an affirming representation
Right,
in a
exactly.
particular way of gay and lesbian people. And I think, in a way, it's a statement for the series to open with this film. To say that queer cinema isn't necessarily about positive images or affirming images.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could speak more about your interest in making this particular film. So this is based upon the writings or even diary and poetry of Walt Curtis. The three main characters are all real people. So what was it that drew you to him as a figure or to his writing and made you wanted to make this into a movie?
I was my friend Eric Edwards, who's a director of photography, and we'd worked together on To Die For, mainly, and had done a lot of things. When we were younger, we went to school together at Rhode Island School of Design, and he had met a person named Penny Allen, who lived in the Corbett neighborhood of Portland, Oregon, which was kind of a new arts neighborhood, a hippie neighborhood, a kind of avant-garde neighborhood, newly avant-garde neighborhood, and old houses that people were renting or trying to buy. And she wanted to make a film about using a CETA grant, which was at that time like kind of a stimulus grant for people that didn't qualify for welfare. So she found a way to kind of fund this film through the government, and she assembled her friends. Walt being one of them. He was the lead character in the film. It was called Property. It was about a group of friends trying to get together and buy their neighborhood, so they didn't have to pay rent. They didn't have to sort of get left out. And the assemblage of friends were varied. Walt being only one of the variations, and there was a drummer from the Holy Model Rounders, Richard, not drummer, piano player, and a queer activist was in the grouping. There was a sort of elegant prostitute, a woman who was like Lola, who was part of the group. there was a anti-war activist who was part of the assemblage of characters, and so Penny, I was asked to come up to do sound, but also accompany Eric in like sort of putting the lights up and sort of handling the tech side of it. So I was the sound guy, and Penny, as a way to introduce Walt, she said, "This is a book Walt wrote, and this is who he is." And it was Mala Noche, and I was reading it and sort of keeping it hidden in my room because it was so like out there and scandalous and sort of shocking, and even though it was like Eric's house that I was staying in, and that was it. The film came out. It was a great project. It still exists somewhere, maybe on YouTube. But I made a short film with during that period, 1977, and then made a feature called Alice in Hollywood, which was set on Hollywood Boulevard, about a girl who comes to be an actress, but she kind of ends up a little more destitute than she wanted to be. And it sort of was, I was kind of too close to it, and I had written the script, and so I was thinking of trying to do something different, and I had been to that festival that I was mentioning, the Gay Festival at the Vista Theater, and I thought, well, Walt's book certainly is like the most like shocking possibility, and I thought, and it was also a gay story, and it sort of had something about it, like I knew that part of Portland well enough that I knew it could be something that I could accomplish, without having a lot of money, and so I kind of made that my next film, and it was really like a shot in the dark. It was made sort of on the run, with a lot of friends and collaborators and people that would let us shoot in their stores or their apartments, and
Okay.
is that the
Yeah.
right answer?
Well,
What was the question?
So I mean, we were talking before the screening a little bit about Waltz, and you said he's he's a working class street poet. He's very rough, and the words in the film are his, but he's actually a little bit softened in terms of you cast someone who's like a little bit more likable. And
Walt was a little older, a little more kind of more of a character. He's in the film. He's sometimes like seen in the film. Balding. But yeah, he came from Oregon City, just south of Portland, and had grown up in the 50s. Worked in there's a lot of logging mills down there. Worked in a mill, cut off his finger with the saw blade, and was a poet, a sort of romantic, very, liked to drink a lot. Like to wander the streets of Portland and just meet people on the street and talk their ear off or talk to them. And he also worked in this shop. A friend of his, George Tahuliotis, his older brother owned the store that he was working in. This wasn't the real store. They had kind of a nicer looking store. This is our kind of makeshift grocery store, and. It was right on 6th Street, which is like in the middle of Skid Road, as Walt called it, in Old Town in Portland. And, these were people that he really met, and he really, developed this fascination with Johnny, and there was the car, and so he wrote it all down in Mala Noche. And he was... He's still alive. He's still in Portland, still writing poetry and writing fiction. There was a few other books that he'd written, as well as Mala Noche, that were kind of based on sort of similar things, like people that lived on the streets and people that he knew. Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot was another character that lived in Northwest Portland, same area, that actually like would buy liquor from Walt
Oh wow.
when he worked at this other shop, which was had more liquor in it. So he knew Callahan. They kind of like all together these characters, and the My Own Private Idaho kids are like just down the street.
Right.
So they were all sort of coming from the same place, but Walt was kind of amazing character.
Yes. So the film is obviously from Walt's point of view and in his words, but both Johnny and Pappas are such interesting characters as well. So I'm wondering if you could tell us more about those guys, how they end up in Portland, sort of how you cast those roles, and like how do you sort of flesh out these characters who are in a complicated relationship with Walt, where sort of he is fetishizing them. Their relationship is transactional, but they also don't do anything they don't want to do, and sort of they push back at certain moments. They have a degree of agency, but also sort of their sort of this sort of political and social and immigration issues sort of place them in a particular way in this moment and in this city. So I wondered if you could just talk more about sort of how they come to be there and their relationship within this film.
Yeah, I think Johnny and Pepper in particular were, I think, spending the winter in Portland instead of risking going across the border and back again, because they wanted to work the next season. So November, I think the season stopped, and they were trying to make it to April, and so they were kind of had nothing to do, and they were like getting in trouble on the street when Walt met them.
So they're basically seasonal laborers who are there sort of in between the seasons.
Yeah, and it was 1975 in Portland that he wrote about. We shot in 83 and 4, but he's writing about a time when the farm laborers from Mexico would come and live in the town, and buses would come to Old Town and pick people up to go work on the outside. By the time we made the movie, I think there were much more solid neighborhoods outside of town that were Mexican American and Mexican neighborhoods that had theater group, and we went out there to try and cast some of the characters. I think there was one young actor in particular who would have been good for Johnny, that I think, like, politically, the story was about characters that were not really hadn't really become part of legally living the legalities of living in Portland, and he felt like because of his family that he wouldn't be representing the new their new situation in Hillsborough, like the town that they lived in. So I think politically it was a little bit out there, and for some of those characters, also the people that really were working in farms were making a lot of money compared to what we were being able to like pay people. So those guys were out. Also, they were very they kind of liked the idea of being in a movie, but the sex was not so bad either, except to film it, like to have it be part of a story, was a little bit too much for them. So the two guys playing the roles of Johnny and Pepper, it took a long time to cast them. Johnny came via an ad that we had in the Oregonian, and he was Native American, and he was really like a Beaverton, like middle class kid, and then Pepper was played by Ray Monge, and he was suggested by Catherine Dunn, the author, who wrote a daily boxing column, which was interesting in itself. But she was really close to Walt, and she was very supportive of the project. And she said, you should go to the Knott Street boxing gym because some of the Latino boxers, may be really great in your film. And I was like, won't they just like punch me out? And she said, no. These guys are very, like they fight for, for their livelihood, so that they're not they're not aggressive. And so I met Pepper. He was a coach there for some of the really young boxers, and his boxers would fight Andy Minsker's boxers. Andy Minsker was a boxer in Portland. So Ray was a boxer, and he just dug it. He also worked at a gay club on the side.
So can you talk a bit about, so when you completed the film, what was its initial life like in terms of getting it into festivals, trying to get it distributed, sort of what kind of circulation did it have in its original moment?
Well, there wasn't. I went to Berlin first. It was my kind of exciting sort of experience with this film, and there were a lot of buyers. It was a great place to try and find somebody that would be able to distribute it. And Rosa von Praunheim took me out and like introduced me to, like, we went into the buyers like area, and he introduced me to like 15 people in a row, and all the people that I was able to show it to and communicate with were sort of on the fence. Sometimes they were interested, but it never sold, and I think it remained unsold probably for 20 years, or 10 years. Before, even after, like, I remember trying to sell it around the time I was making Psycho in '97, and I was close. But eventually, MK2, this is an MK2 print, they bought it in France after they were after Elephant. So it was pretty recently that this was finally seeing something. NPR showed it at the time that it was made in Los Angeles and New York for a number of showings, which is kind of great.
Okay, I'm sure we have a lot of questions in the audience, and we have a couple of people with microphones if people have questions. So please raise your hand if you have a question, but then wait for the microphone because we are actually doing a recording. So do we have any questions in the audience? Okay, front row.
Yes.
Can I just speak?
Wait for the microphone. Yeah. Okay, here you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the beautiful 35 millimeter cinematography and how it was shot and what film stocks, if you remember?
Yeah, that was like a big kind of question, going into making. I had shot the previous film, Alice in Hollywood, on color 16 millimeter, and making this one, I wanted to be a little bit more. I wanted to, I guess, have something that would be a little more stylish, which black and white always is. But then there's always the problem of it being like less valuable to distributors. So I just forewent that problem and shot on 16 millimeter plus X, mostly plus X. And then when the light was too dim, we were going up to like tri-X and 4X sometimes, but a lot of it's plus X. And then that 16 was later, when I made a little bit of money on it, I was able to blow it up to 35. So it's all
Thank you.
It's all 16.
Do we have another question? Okay.
Hi, so I was wondering if you could speak about your leap from indie filmmaking to more mainstream filmmaking. Did your process of how you develop your films change? And do you still shoot in the same way you shot, back then? I was wondering if you can just touch on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. This particular film, unlike the previous film that I'd made, I used my own money. I was working in New York City in advertising and saving the money. It took me like 2 years to save $20,000 to afford it. And so during that 2-year period, which was sort of the danceteria, mud club period of New York, I didn't go out so much like the others did. I saved my money, didn't buy cocaine, and meanwhile, with my free time, not working, I was storyboarding it. So I had these like very elaborate storyboards that I actually used day by day. I had, you know, like everything mapped out, and I was able to shoot very fast because our crew was just 3 people. It was a sound person, Pat Baum, who was also the the drummer for the Neo Boys, which is now a well-known Portland band, and was well-known then as well. And John Campbell, the cinematographer, and me. So I could just say, okay, stand there, and like I could assemble the storyboard very fast. I could shoot it very fast. And with the film at Berlin and here, specifically here at the LA Lesbian and Gay Film Festival, is that what it was called? Okay. Which I was kind of resisting because the Frameline, I became very close to Frameline, and Frameline was San Francisco versus like LA, and I thought I was an Oregonian, and I was kind of an idiot when it came to like show business, so I just said I don't want to go to LA, but then I was really talked into it, and because of that, a roommate. Or a person I was staying with in Los Angeles was somebody that I had met in Berlin, and he had an agent that he gave a tape to, and so I all of a sudden had an agent, which was kind of against my will, but also like he was getting me meetings and things, and I was trying to sell them on like modernized Shakespeare script, which ended up to be Idaho. But Drugstore Cowboy was something that I had as a manuscript, and then I adapted it into a screenplay because they weren't able to read a manuscript, the people that I was talking to at studios. And then we won I was given a prize by the LA Film Critics for Best Independent Experimental Film. And if you left off the experimental part, it was the best independent film of the year. And so I called my agent. I was in Oregon, and said, "Do you know that we won this prize? Maybe I'll send a friend to get it." And he was like, "Are you kidding? You know, this is fantastic." And I was like, "Do you think I should come down?" And he was like, "Yes, come down, and we'll send you out." And he really pushed Drugstore Cowboy right at that moment, and that was sort of my entry right there. And Drugstore Cowboy, I had the meeting with the people at Avenue Pictures, and they were just they had the head of it had made Kiss of the Spider Woman at Island, and he created his own company, Kerry Brokaw, and I was sitting in a meeting, and I had asked Tom Waits to play the lead in Drugstore Cowboy, and he said he would do it. So in the meeting, he asked me how much I thought it would cost. And I said $500,000, and he said, "Okay, well, we won't have to worry about that," because they were in the business making $4 million movies. And when I said I had Tom Waits, he was like, "Well, he's in one of our other movies." He wasn't impressed, which I thought was crazy. And but I think the real trial by fire was the shooting of, a $4 million movie compared to this movie was I could shoot 90 setups a day in Mala Noche, and Drugstore Cowboy was 13 setups a day, and I had made the same storyboard. I was completely unable to follow the storyboard because of the crew. Bob Yeoman, who's now shooting Wes Anderson's movies, was the DP. It was just super slow. The crew was a huge 80 people crew, and lighting, everything, it was incredible. So I just changed my style of shooting by rehearsing first, choosing angles after the rehearsal. So it was just a completely rethinking, and not particularly easy. It turned out well, but it was almost like dicey.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Okay, there we go.
Hi, Gus. I got a question about the lighting in the film. There's lots of blackness in it, and I imagine back then you don't have digital, so you can't do a quick playback and see what it looks like on the fly. Was that ever nerve-wracking, and how was it lighting on a budget back then?
It was sort of a choice to do it like that. I was influenced by Eraserhead, which is very dark, and also sometimes Eraserhead would have, they would use spotlights. Interestingly, sometimes there would be a light on the wall and there'd be a spotlight spotlighting the light on the wall, and I really liked the way that looked. So I rented 2 spotlights, and we had a little lighting kit, like a Lowell light kit, which I think had three 1,000 watt lights with stands, and then we maybe had a couple clip-ons. So we sort of were unable to. A lot of times we were using just available lights. If it was light bulbs in a hallway, say like the hallway he's walking down in the hotel, I think we would change the light bulbs so they were more powerful. So we had some light bulbs with us, but it was dark, probably because I was thinking about that tonight watching it, because we just didn't have lights, and we were sort of welcoming the darkness, since the title was Mala Noche. And then we thought, I think evaluated each shot, are we getting what we want? But it was kind of amazing how it's like a lot of it is in silhouette, which is kind of great. And I guess we thought that's what we were doing. I can't remember that far back. I don't think it was a mistake, but sometimes we thought, oh well, if it goes dark, it'll go dark. Downtown, for instance, when we're on the street running around at night, I'm not sure if we knew until we got the film back what would happen.
So I want to close with just one final question, which is, so you watched the film again tonight. So I'm wondering if you see it differently now than you saw it at the time, and sort of what feels different, what actually feels the same to you.
Well, at the time it took me a long time to edit. I was editing on rewinds with a movie scope and like a sound reader, if you guys even know what that is. It's like there wasn't even an upright editing machine or a flatbed. It was just you're cranking it, and and however fast you crank it is how fast the film's going. And I was using, Scotch tape instead of editing tape, and to cut corners, which is not advised, because it gets gooey later. And I was showing it to my friends. I was showing the rough cut to my friends, and it really looked like my friends would say something like, well, it's a movie, I guess. And I just had not a whole lot of confidence, and I thought, okay, I did my best, and I really sort of tried to make everything fit together. And in the final print, it looked a lot better than the wonky. We would show the actual work print through a kind of dual system thing, and also I transferred it to video so I could show it at somebody's house, and I was showing people sometimes to raise a little bit more money to finish it. And it wasn't until the actual premiere, where Doug, who played Johnny, hid in the projection booth and looked out, was afraid to come down into the audience. And I was almost the same way. I was like thinking, this is just the only time that we'll be seen. And then people sort of stuck around in the lobby and talked, and they seemed energetic. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe it has an actual life. So tonight I thought maybe I sort of had that same feeling of oh my God, it's some things I could see the mistakes.
Well, I feel like at its time there had not been a film like that looked like this or was like this, and I think it's still true. Like it still feels like nothing else that I've seen. So thank you for sharing your film with us this evening. We're going to take a brief intermission, so you can go to the restroom, grab a sip of water, and I strongly recommend coming back for Sue Friedrich's Hide and Seek. It's a fantastic film. So thank you again to Gus.
Thank you.